Olá, pessoal, sejam todas e todos bem-vindos ao workshop de Estética do programa de pós-graduação Lógica e Metafísica da Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. Eu sou a Rose, sou doutoranda aqui no programa e estou organizando esse evento junto com os meus colegas aqui do PPGLM, a Luísa Luzi, a Beatriz Sá e o Eric Ramalho. E o Tiago também, que não está aqui, mas sempre nos ajuda. Hoje nós teremos a palestra da professora Inês Morais. A palestra vai ser proferida em inglês e vai ser mediada pela Luísa, mas se vocês quiserem e se sentirem mais confortáveis em fazerem perguntas em português, podem fazer aqui nos comentários, tanto em inglês quanto em português. No final a gente vai ter a apresentação da professora, mas seguida de um debate, né? Então, no final desse debate, nós vamos estar disponibilizando uma lista de presença para quem quiser o certificado depois. Bem, eu acho que é isso. Eu vou deixar... Desculpa, eu não coloquei a professora aqui, desculpa, gente. Seja bem-vinda, Inês, e... boa palestra, bom evento.
Muito obrigada. Thanks for inviting me to give this talk for a Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. It's an honor and a privilege to be here speaking to you all. Thanks also to my colleagues at Escola Básica de São João de Estoril and Escola Secundária de São João de Estoril for not emailing me today and for their support. And I'm going to share my screen, which is what matters. I don't know if you can see. Can you see? Can you see, Luisa? Hello?
Yeah, it's up.
Yes, you can see.
Yeah.
Good. So I'll start. So the title of my talk is Why Aesthetic Realism? And this is work in progress. And the painting that you can see here is...
No, wait. Inês,
yes,
it's not actually.
Yes.
We're not actually seeing the PowerPoints, the slides.
You can't see the PowerPoint. Okay,
no.
So let's see. What's compartilhar.
Just a second, guys. Just a second, everyone. Everyone,
okay.
Welcome.
Let's see if you can see now. Can you see now? Not yet?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Okay, that's fine. So I'll stop sharing and I'll share again. I'll do sharing. And now you can see? Can you see?
We're just seeing your screen.
So you don't see the sharing? Let me see.
Sorry. Yeah.
No problem. We sort it. This is the first we're doing. So share should be doing it. Let me see. Can you see it now?
No.
No, this is wishful thinking.
Yeah, I think you better try the other method.
I'll stop sharing and I'll share again. Share screen again. Okay, and now it should work.
Yes,
perfect. Yes, good, excellent. Otherwise,
okay.
I would have plan B, but there is plan A, which is good. So the painting that you can see here is a detail of a self-portrait by Elisabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun with her daughter, which is a painting at the Louvre in Paris. It's one of my favorite paintings. And I will be talking about aesthetic realism and why what we say about works is about works and not just about ourselves. I lost here one thing. It is that, talking is a risk. Talking is a risk, but it's sometimes necessary or important. And philosophy at its best is Untitled Talk. It is engaged in promoting worldviews that are more reasonable than the prevalent ones, and in abandoning or eliminating vices in thought or obsolete ideas and practices that ought to be eliminated. And today I will be doing that. I will be promoting aesthetic realism, which I find an important idea, and I will be trying to show how important it is. So that's the main thing. So here is the abstract, which you can then read if you watch it later. You have it in the comment on YouTube as well, in the comment area. And my plan will be the following. Are you all following me? So are you all seeing me? Because I can't see anyone. Is Louisa?
Yeah,
here?
it's great.
Yes? Okay. So my plan will be different from the plan of my book. In my book, which is called Aesthetic Realism, which is from 2019, I first discuss the debate between realists and anti-realists. I discuss several anti-realist arguments, and then I proceed to defend realism and to describe aesthetic realism more in more detail. Today, I'm serving you something different, so I'm offering you something different. And the plan will be just to introduce aesthetic realism. So I will go straight to the doctrine, aesthetic realism. I will then present some modern arguments for aesthetic realism. Then I will present one more controversial meta-theoretical argument. I will try to say at least, and it's tentative. I will say that philosophizing about the aesthetic realm presupposes that we are aesthetic realists. So this is quite strong, I think. And finally, I will present some applications of aesthetic realism. So this is the plan, and it's different from the book. So the book is imperfect, and my teaching is imperfect as well. So teaching is an imperfect art, but that's what we will be doing today. So let's move on to the introduction to aesthetic realism. And I will be committing myself to four claims. First, one ontological claim, an existence claim. I'm saying that there are aesthetic properties that there are picked out in our aesthetic judgments. So when we speak about this painting, for example, we attribute aesthetic properties to it. And if we speak truly, we are picking out aesthetic properties, genuine properties of the works, not expressions of our feelings or attitudes, not projections, not anything like that, not our subjectivity. It will be something objective. So it's an ontological claim I'm making, or I'll be making, and I will make another ontological claim about the nature of these properties. I will say that aesthetic properties are intrinsic, objective properties of the works. And by intrinsic, I mean simply what G. Moore says in the conception of aesthetic value, that intrinsic is just what is preserved in a duplicate. So whatever is preserved in a duplicate is an intrinsic property of an object. And so these properties exist independently of any perception of attribution or response or thought. So they are properties that belong to the object. So when I'm speaking about this painting, I'm talking about the painting. I'm not talking about my subjectivity, even if subjectivity is necessary for me to see the painting. So two claims, an ontological claim about existence, an ontological claim about the nature of these properties. And I will also make a linguistic claim, a semantic claim. I will say that aesthetic judgments can be true or false. So they are truth apt. And these claims are related, of course. And finally, I will make an epistemological claim, a claim about knowledge. I will say that there can be aesthetic knowledge and that there are aesthetic facts. So there are things that we can teach about this painting. and that we can say falsely or truly, and if it's truly, it will, well, some of them will be knowledge that can be conveyed. So you can by now guess a few of the advantage of endorsing aesthetic realism. So if anyone wants to interrupt me, just feel free to do so. So these are the 4 claims I'm committed to when defending aesthetic realism. And here are some examples of how useful the doctrine is and how important it is to endorse it instead of anti-realism, which is prevalent still, or at least widespread, very widespread still in aesthetics. We have this painting by Claude Monet. It's a painting from 1872. It's Still Life with Melon. It's an oil on canvas from Museu Carlos Gulbenkian. The photograph was taken yesterday. I took my adult students of Portuguese to the museum, and I took this photograph, which is an imperfect photograph. So the aesthetic properties that a viewer can perceive in the painting are not the aesthetic properties that we can see, that we can grasp just by looking at a photograph, but there is something that is preserved, and what we are here addressing is exactly what's in the painting, and that's what I want to emphasize quite a lot. So this is a painting by Claude Monet, and I'm not a specialist in art history, but I'm just saying that the attributions of value and of aesthetic properties that we make of works really are about the works and not about ourselves. Especially, this is another photograph I took yesterday. It's recognizable Rembrandt painting. It's a bad photograph on purpose, or not on purpose, but I couldn't use the flash. And it's good to show as well that the aesthetic properties that we are able to grasp of this painting are not the same as the properties that we would be able to see at the museum or in a better photograph. But we can recognize the style and the properties of the style of Rembrandt and the characteristics of his self-portrait. It's also from Museu Carlos Gulbenkian and taken yesterday as well. And this is another photograph of the same painting, which you can see. This is only to call your attention for the works themselves. And that's all I'm emphasizing now. I'm calling your attention to the works. And when we attribute aesthetic properties to a work, we are talking about the objects. It's an objective claim we're trying to make and not about ourselves. And I will be focusing on the most general aesthetic property. I'll be focusing on beauty. Because it's the worst case scenario, it's the most general property and the property that many people claim isn't objective, is in the eyes of the beholder, some people say. So if that property can be shown to be objective, then all the other more specific properties can be objective too. And that's what I'll try to suggest that we should think. So this is one famous painting. The painting is not from Museu Carlos Gulbenkian. It's from a Spanish museum from Madrid, but it's now it's now in Museu Carlos Gulbenkian. And we can speak about aesthetic properties about many things. So this is just a plain photograph of Leiria, an area in Leiria. You can see the castle up there. And it's just a steep road you can see. And still in a humble photograph like this, and still in a humble image like this, you can imagine you watching the image, you can see the properties of what you see and the properties of the photograph as well. And again, the beauty that we can ascribe to the view, to what we can see, is in the image we see. It's not in us. It's not something that we project onto works, or that we are expressing, or that we are disposed to feel. It's something that is either is or is not in the painting. So in the photograph in this case. So you can say that this is not beautiful, and I can say that it's beautiful, but we can compare with other things that are more beautiful, less beautiful, more this, more the other. All I'm saying is that the properties that we attribute to works either are there to be perceived, or they are not there to be perceived, or they can be present in a great extent, or less. So this is another example. So I want to focus both on works of art and works of nature at this point. Here you have an ordinary object, a hat. It's fluffy, and you can see that in the photograph. So again, all the properties we can attribute to the object either are there to be perceived, or they are not there to be perceived. What we say, if we make an aesthetic judgment, if it's truly an aesthetic judgment, then it's either true or false. And we are talking about the object, not about ourselves. Even if the object inspires associations, emotions, whatever. And I chose an ordinary object just because of that, to show that this applies to several things. And here we have, again, an ordinary picture of the sea. And again, there is blue, there is movement, there is light, there is shade, there is color, there is lots of things. There are lots of things that we can invoke about this photograph. And all I say is that what we say can be true or false, entirely depending on the photograph itself, or on the image we're talking about. It's not about our emotions, our feelings, our desires, our attitudes, dispositions, projections. Our projections have nothing to do with the aesthetic properties of the object. So again, that's what I'm trying to call attention to. And another photograph, it's actually in the same beach, and the objective is the same, to show different perspectives. Again, whatever we say about this this photograph is true of it if the properties are there to be detected. So it's a matter of detection, not of projection. And here more, again, what we would say about the other photograph would not be true about this one, and so on. So these are basic things I'm just calling attention to. And again, these are all familiar places, here at least. And a very humble photograph of the sea, which we can see as beautiful still. So I want to show as well that some instances of beauty are not obvious. So their beauty is elusive sometimes, and it is an aesthetic property for that reason as well. So attributing beauty to a painting, or to a photograph, or to an image that we see in nature isn't always something obvious. So all these instances of beauty, that I would call that way, can be elusive. So the attributions of beauty can be something difficult as well. Not in this case, but in some cases the answer isn't obvious. And now I'm going to show you something different, exactly to suggest that aesthetic realism is true, and there is knowledge that we can share and convey, aesthetic knowledge about works about which we know nothing yet. So I'm going to show you a work by F. Organ Biscaya, Filipa Organ Biscaya. It's a recent work called Wave. So she's not a distinguished artist, but she's very good. She's a friend, that's why I know about her work. And it's oil pastel on A2 craft cards, and she described it as emotional, serene, dramatic, with shade and light. And for now, I'm just showing you the description. So you have the title, you have the name of the author, and you have some description or some assessment of it by the author, by the artist. Who aren't always, artists aren't always the best judges of their own work, but she was quite precise, I think. And you can by now imagine what will be shown, even though there will be an element of surprise. So only when you see it, you will be acquainted with the painting. It's a painting because it's all covered in oil pastel. You will, I will show you. So this is the painting. It's, I won't describe it. I will just let you see it and think of the aesthetic properties it contains. But it's not just this. It's not just this. It's a triptych. So it's a wave that is shown in sequence. So the second one is this, and the third one is this. So if you move, you can see that it is a triptych. It's a triptych. So are you all there? Can Louisa just let me know that, are you all there?
Hi.
Yes?
Yes,
oh,
we're here.
Good, excellent,
Yes.
because I can't see anyone. I can't see anyone. Good. So this is a triptych. This is a triptych of a beach in Estoril, I would gather. And I didn't speak to her about the work. She just wrote those notes on the work. It's emotional, serene, dramatic, with shade and light. And this would evoke aesthetic properties that Filipa is saying that the work possesses. So it's not that she's disposed to see it in certain ways. Either the properties are in the work, or they are not in the work, or they are to some extent, but not in some respect. But they don't. They aren't projections of feelings or attitudes, even if we have feelings and attitudes towards the work. So it's something that disagreements are about what is in the work. Disagreements are not about our dispositions, our feelings, disagreements are about the works themselves. And that's what aesthetic realism tries to say. So I'll move on. Actually to a claim by Fernando Pessoa in Herostratus, which is an essay on the celebrity and the posterity of great works. It's an essay that I recommend. It's very good. It's mostly about literature, but it's very interesting for art in general. And Pessoa says, in a poem, we must understand what the poem wants, but we may feel what we like. So that's what I'm trying to say as well, in a way. We want to see what the poem says, what the poem wants, what the work of art, in this case, what the painting wants. Not what the author, not what the artist wants, but what the painting, which is his child or her child already, and it's rather independent after a while. And then we can feel what we like. We can feel what we like. But when we make aesthetic judgments, if they are genuine aesthetic judgments, these are not about our feelings, they are about the works themselves. And that's what I would like to emphasize. So I'll carry on. Carry on with something very different. This was my backyard when I was living in the UK. It's just an ordinary photograph about something not particularly beautiful, but in which we can see some beauty still, if we want to find it there. So I'm saying that the beauty is there. It's just that in some instances the beauty isn't obvious or isn't absolute, isn't overwhelming. In some cases the beauty is overwhelming, in some cases it's less obvious, and this is one case. But it's there to be perceived, and we can see aesthetic properties in this image, and you can imagine the image itself without the photograph. You can imagine looking through the window of the kitchen and seeing this with the snow in the backyard. And I think anyone in principle can find, detect, locate the beauty in the image. So it's not something we project onto it. It's not my feelings. It's not my desires, my attitudes, my dispositions. It's not my expression of subjectivity. This is about this object, this image. And either the beauty is there and the other aesthetic properties are there, or they aren't. And I claim that they are here, at least. And they are objective. They are there. They are intrinsic. Any duplicate would have the same beauty, and anyone can, in principle, detect it and find it. And another image, again, ordinary image, ordinary view, ordinary life that can be beautiful. If only we have our eyes open to see it. So that's the main idea that I'm trying to emphasize. So we can move on to a poem to vary. I just didn't bring any music because it was difficult to share it, but I'm bringing you a poem. It's a poem by Ricardo Reis, who is one of the figures that Fernando Pessoa invented. So a poet invented by Fernando Pessoa, a heteronym invented by Fernando Pessoa. And it's an ode. And I'm going to read, you can read the Portuguese if you are a native speaker of Portuguese, or if you can understand Portuguese. In fact, it's worth learning Portuguese just to read Fernando Pessoa. It's my view. But I'll read the poem in English. To be great, be one. Nothing of yours exaggerate or exclude. Be whole in each thing. Put what you are in the smallest thing you do. Likewise, in each lake, the whole moon shines because high it lives. So it's a beautiful poem. And the beauty is in the poem. It's not my projections again. It's not my feelings. It's not my desires. It's not my attitudes. Even though my dispositions, my attitudes, my feelings, my associations, my personal circumstances contribute to or help me see the beauty in the poem. But the beauty of the poem is in the poem, and any other poem, an exact duplicate would be just as beautiful. And that's all I'm saying. So we should be aesthetic realists. So to review a little bit what we've been doing, I made an ontological claim, a claim about existence. There are aesthetic properties that are picked out in these aesthetic judgments. So there are aesthetic properties that this humble painting has. It's a sunflower. We can see it's a sunflower. It's obviously worse in terms of aesthetic value, worse than Van Gogh's sunflower paintings, obviously. And we can make comparative judgments with other works. I brought it exactly because it's a very, very humble painting. It was painted by me. It was the first painting I painted, so it's nothing. It's not of aesthetic importance, but it's a good example for showing this. So I made an ontological claim, an existence claim. There are aesthetic properties. They are in the painting. Another claim, nature, about the nature of these properties. These properties are intrinsic. So what I say about the painting as an aesthetic judgment is intrinsic, it's objective. And these properties exist independently of any perception or attribution. So it's not about me, it's about the painting. I make a linguistic claim, a semantic claim. These aesthetic judgments can be true or false. I can say, if I say that the flower is orange, I will be claiming something false. If I say that it's garish, we can discuss. If I say that it's dramatic, we can discuss and see. So some things aren't obvious, some things aren't clear, some things aren't easy. So I'm not saying that it's all easy. Some things are difficult to make, some claims are difficult to make. But all I'm saying is that we are talking in aesthetic judgments, we're talking about the objects themselves. Otherwise, there is no way of explaining the normativity that we associate with aesthetic judgments, that some are right and some are obviously wrong. Someone who would claim that this painting is superior to Van Gogh's sunflower paintings would be making a mistake, making a false claim. So there are mistakes that we can make. So aesthetic realism is correct. And the epistemological claim about knowledge, there can be aesthetic knowledge and there are aesthetic facts. There are the true claims that I make about this painting convey knowledge that I can share with others that can then be seen in the painting. And the fact that I only know the painting by acquaintance with it is no impediment to the truth of aesthetic realism. So we can remain aesthetic realists whilst claiming that we only fully grasp the value and the aesthetic properties of a painting or a poem or a piece of music or a sculpture or a piece of dance, whatever, when we are directly acquainted with the painting or acquainted with the object, with the artwork in some way. So I'll move on to modern arguments for aesthetic realism, and I'll go quicker. The first one is indispensability, and this is a strong argument. Aesthetic properties are indispensable to aesthetic discourse, or in another way of seeing it, they are ineliminable from aesthetic discourse. We constantly invoke aesthetic properties to talk about works of art, and it's difficult to paraphrase, it's impossible to paraphrase such discourse without resorting to without invoking aesthetic properties. And so they are indispensable, they are ineliminable, and they are there. We're not projecting, we're not expressing ourselves, we're talking about the works. And AR means just aesthetic realism, so it's my book. Have I shown it? So that's It's an imperfect book, but it's a good project. Well shared by others. We'll see that in a moment. More modern arguments for aesthetic realism, explanation or explanatory power, and several people mention those arguments. So I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm building on the work of others, of course, and I'm building on the works of the best. Since I'm an independent scholar, I can just read the best ones, which is good. I'm quoting from the book because it's useful to do so sometimes. Aesthetic discourse is explained by the realist as being about something properly belonging to external reality. And aesthetic disagreement is thought to concern the best way to construe, not to construct such independent reality. So aesthetic realism has an explanation for disagreement, for the reality we talk about when we talk about art or other aesthetic objects. And now Levinson, without countenancing aesthetic properties, it's difficult to see what competent critics with evaluative difference of opinion could really be talking about. So disagreement is explained by aesthetic realism in a elegant way and simple way. No other theory, now Nick Sangwell, no other theory seems to be able to do justice to the normative aspirations of aesthetic judgments. So aesthetic realism explains normativity in an easy way, whereas other doctrines don't. And continuing, this is in French. I can read in French. Notre expérience des valeurs se présente comme celle d'une confrontation avec quelque chose d'extérieur à nous, qui existe indépendamment de nous et de nos conventions. This is Tapolé, Christine Tapolé, Émotions et valeurs, a book from 2000, very good book. And la beauté d'une toile est perçue comme se trouvant dans l'œuvre d'art et non pas comme projetée sur elle ou encore comme relative à notre sentiment esthétique ou à nos conventions sociales. So our experience of values is presented as a confrontation with something exterior to us that exists independently of us and of our conventions. And the beauty of a canvas is perceived as being in the work and not as projected on it, or else as relative to our aesthetic sentiment or to our social conventions. This is just what I've been saying, so I'm not making any saying anything new. This is there. This is shared by aesthetic realists, and the problem is that there aren't too many of us yet. And my objective today is to convince a few more people to change their minds if they are expressivists or projectivists or error theorists or dispositionalists, response-dependent people, whatever. And Mary Mothersill, Beauty Restored, a great book from 1984. The merits of a work are discovered, not conferred. Or Philip Pettit, The Possibility of Aesthetic Realism from 1983. What an aesthetic description of a painting captures when it is a faithful record is something which properly belongs to the painting and something which is in principle accessible to all. Again, it's very good to see this, but this is a minority still. Still on explanatory power, regarding the objection of the elusive nature of aesthetic properties. Even if only a minority of people can discern some aesthetic properties, those capable of making finer discriminations, and discriminations they are, and that's the point. This is Sibley. That's not a reason to eschew realism. Only a minority of people can distinguish between a Lusitano horse and an Andalusian one. They are very similar horses in terms of conformation, but that doesn't imply that there is not a genuine distinction to be made. So even though I can't distinguish between two paintings in terms of value, for example, or in terms of beauty, that doesn't mean that there isn't a distinction to be made. Maybe someone with a finer discrimination capacity can make that distinction that I cannot make. And what aesthetic realists say is that it's a matter of discrimination, it's a matter of distinction, it's a matter of detection, it's a matter of finding, not projection, not feelings, not associations. More arguments for aesthetic realism: the descriptive limits of aesthetic attributions. So aesthetic attributions have descriptive limits, so not everything is beautiful, not everything is garish, not everything is elegant, not everything is delicate, not everything is balanced, not everything is ugly, not everything is so on. So this is Mothersill, 1984, in judging Beethoven's Opus 59, number 1, to be beautiful by hypothesis. I implicate an avowal, but I also make a substantive claim, one that doesn't seem to me to involve any displacement or projection of my feelings on the object judged. So it's not a projection of my feelings. It is a detection. It is a discrimination, a capacity for seeing. It's an opening of the eyes to reality. It's not an imagination. It's not imagination, even though imagination is necessary to, or an active mind is necessary, is important, is necessary to grasp aesthetic traits. Not everything can truly be said to be elegant, delicate, balanced, garish, etc. So this is from the book, from my book. And a fourth argument is simplicity. And I quote from Christine Tapollet: le réalisme axiologique est la façon la plus radicale, mais aussi la plus simple, de rendre compte de la grammaire des termes axiologiques, de la phénoménologie des valeurs et de l'objectivité que présuppose notre pratique. This is excellent. So axiological realism, so realism about values, is the most radical but also the simplest way of accounting for the grammar of axiological terms, of the phenomenology of values, and of the objectivity that our practice presupposes. I have nothing to add to this. That's exactly what I believe. So Christine Tapollet believes that values are monadic axiological properties. So they are properties that are intrinsic to what we, to the things that have them. And that's her view, and that's also my view. So I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And I move on to point number 2 in the agenda, a meta-theoretical argument for aesthetic realism. This is more controversial and more tentative, so you will be able to counter a little bit if you want. I want to say that aesthetic realism is required for serious philosophizing about the aesthetic realm. So this is rather strong, I know. But I think that positing a distinctively aesthetic realm and having aesthetics as a philosophical discipline presupposes and requires that we construe beauty and the other aesthetic properties we attribute to works of art and natural objects in a realist manner. So we are not, we don't philosophize about phlogiston or things that don't matter, unicorns, except that we can give them as examples of things that don't exist, but or they are fictional. But if we have a philosophy of beauty, and if we have a philosophy of art, and if we have aesthetics, and if we want to say that there is an aesthetic realm, we want to say that there is something out there that we talk about. And that's what aesthetic realism says. So it's nothing radical It's not radical at all. Well, it's radical only because many people claim that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that claim that we don't argue about tastes. In reality, aesthetic realism is a commonsensical view, and it should be mainstream. Philosophizing about the aesthetic realm presupposes that we construe beauty and the other aesthetic properties in a realist manner. So this is just a suggestion for discussion. It's work in progress. This is a workshop, and I thought I should say what I think, and then we can polish it a bit if it needs some polishing. And we only philosophize about things worth philosophizing about. So if beauty was just a projection of feelings, I don't think we would have a philosophy of beauty as we have, unless if you want to eliminate it from your ontology altogether. It's true that atheists also philosophize about God. They do, and they don't believe God exists. But this is a different area, I don't think, because here everyone has some shared knowledge or shared views about beauty. It's just that some people claim that they are only projections of feelings, and others say that they are things. So now we move on to some applications, because we are running out of time. Some applications of aesthetic realism, and this is tentative as well. If we are aesthetic realists, we can understand that de gustibus disputandum. I'm here questioning a common sense dictum, de gustibus non disputandum. That's the traditional doctrine. And I'm saying de gustibus disputandum. There is arguing about tastes, and we do argue about tastes. And there is something we argue about. So it's not that we argue about our projections, our feelings, our attitudes. We're arguing about the works themselves, and the attitudes they inspire, of course, but the works themselves, how to construe the works. That's what matters. And aesthetic realism allows for construing these debates as significant, as meaningful, and we can see how disagreement is about something in reality. Again, aesthetic realism can explain that beauty is not in the eyes of the beholder, contrary to popular opinion. So this idea that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder is just a common sense idea that is mistaken. So sometimes common sense has good ideas, sometimes common sense spreads ideas that are not very well argued for, or not very reflective. And I think clearly beauty is not in the eyes of the beholder. Beauty is in reality, in external reality, is or is not. The third application, the third way we can apply aesthetic realism is regarding the possibility of aesthetic knowledge and of aesthetic education. Here is the most important thing, perhaps. So canon formation and comparisons, the way we talk about art is all the time committed to aesthetic realism. The way we teach is committed to aesthetic realism. At its best, when we teach about works that have value, that do have good aesthetic properties. We choose works to teach that are worthy aesthetically and artistically, and we can tie the two together. And we make comparisons. We say, who is the best composer ever, classical composer? Who is best, this singer, that singer? We can make these comparisons thanks to the idea that there are true claims that we can make about works and false claims that we can make about works. So canon formation and comparisons are made possible by the fact that works do have aesthetic properties. Taste education. There can be education because aesthetic realism is true. Otherwise, we would be in chaos. But we can discuss this later. So education in general is possible because there is knowledge to be conveyed. And the possibility of progress in aesthetic taste is possible also because truths exist and can be taught. If what we say about works is just a projection of our feelings, then there isn't much we can do to teach others and to learn about taste, whereas aesthetic realism explains the possibility of progress in aesthetic taste. Also, aesthetic realists are better equipped to explain art that is overrated and art that is underrated. And it's so easy to see that there are overrated artworks. They are worth millions financially, and that are not too much better than other artworks that are worth nothing financially or in terms of public recognition. So aesthetic realism has a way of comparing art like that and of explaining these imbalance, the imbalance between overrated art and underrated art and so on. And everyday aesthetic decisions. Aesthetic realists can explain why we could prefer, now I'll say something controversial, not to have tattoos, for example. Why, this is very controversial, I know, or pierced ears. I have pierced ears, so we can discuss that. So we can talk about these things as things in reality that have value or lack value, and that are rational to the decisions that we can make about things in reality. So it's not just our attitudes that are in place. This is also important. So this is a selected bibliography. In the recording, this will be visible, and these are only 20 entries. And I usually say to my students that what we take from lessons are just some new words and books to read, or words to read, or words to see. So this is also an important slide. And thank you. This is a candle from a student who's leaving, student of Portuguese, an adult student of Portuguese. She gave me this candle last week because she's leaving to the US. And it says, "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They must be felt with the heart." It's by Helen Keller. And so thank you. Thank you. I think I didn't use the whole time.
No, no, actually, yeah, you had a few minutes left if you still wanted to.
I think I think I'm okay. There's no point in talking too much. Sometimes it's better to say less, and then if there are questions, then we can see. So you could see the slides. That's good. That's good.
Yes, they were wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very clear. Yeah, we have a couple, actually more than a couple questions from the chat at YouTube. I have a question also, but I think I'll let. I mean, that phrase you quoted, that the properties are not discovered, they are discovered, not attributed. That really
not. They are discovered, not projected. Not projected.
Not projected. Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, would it, I kept thinking about potential, and like we humans, we have limitations. I mean, all the living beings have limitations, but I remembered reading about some species of lobster that could perceive a lot more colors than we do. I mean, not that they have the brain to appreciate what they're looking at, but I mean, how can we think about non-human society or even different types of societies that discover different things in those objects? I mean, when you look at the bust of Cleopatra in Berlin, you can see something that people that made the bust didn't see, and vice versa. So how much can we depend on those properties, on the discovery of those properties, if people looking at it at the same time cannot perceive them? I mean, or societies will even deny them, will I guess posit contradictory properties to something, maybe.
It's true. Yes, I mean, very interesting question. Very interesting question. I think the fact that some people perceive different things isn't a reason to reject aesthetic realism. I think we can have an elephant, and some people see the front of the elephant, some people see the back of the elephant, the sides, and we can all see different sides of things. But it doesn't mean that it's not a detection, a matter of detection, of finding, of seeing the properties in the work. So if we discover new properties that we had never noticed before, which we do, that doesn't mean that we are imagining or making up. It just means that we are discovering, we're seeing, discovering new things in the work. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but just a little something else. It's just then it kind of is a bit sad though, right? Because there will be properties that we just cannot discover. We cannot perceive them. There will be a lot of things about many types of objects that we just don't have the ability, the physical capacity to discover. So there'll be potentially a lot of properties to things that we just will never know.
That's true. And you pointed to something important, that our knowledge is, reality extends our knowledge, but that's about life in general. We don't know everything about everything. So it's aesthetic life is no different from science in that respect. Okay. We don't know everything. We don't know everything. But I think that's fascinating, because one thing about poems as well, which is what I know better, perhaps, poems sometimes, and works of art in general, fascinate us also because of what we don't see, also because of the mystery they have, and also about the things we don't understand in them. So part of the appeal of a work of art and of an image and of beauty as well is the things, I think, the things we cannot fully grasp. We can grasp a little, but not everything. And sometimes the poems we like best are poems that are difficult and that involve some sort of mystery. So the fact that we don't know everything about aesthetics isn't something to be sorry for or be sad about. It's something good. It's good. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the lecture. It was really informative and very nice. We have a lot of questions, and Leonardo Sotalo asks.
So, sorry, you read. Oh, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay, if the beauty is already in the object and intrinsically in it, how disagreement concerning beauty is explained?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I'll try to answer. Well, truth in general is not grasped by everyone. So disagreement can be explained as differences in sensitivity. So some people do see better than others. So sometimes disagreement does concern mistakes on the part of some of the disputants. But in some cases, it's just seeing different aspects of the same thing that are not incompatible. So sometimes it can be just seeing one side of the elephant, the other side of the elephant. But indeed, there are differences in apprehension as well. Some people do see better than others. I think we have to accept this. About some things, I can see better about the things I'm familiar with, and we are all like that. And in aesthetics, there are always people who know how to see some things better than others. Some people specialize in Rembrandt, and they can see more aesthetic properties than I can see in a Rembrandt painting. And other people specialize in other aspects of aesthetic life, and they can see other things. I focus on most general things, so that's what I see better. Maybe I miss other aspects. Of course, I miss other aspects. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Inês. We have other questions. Let's see. Pedro de Sá. For a value or object corresponding to the ontological content of aesthetics, whatever that may be, is real in the realism sense, then does that mean it is an existent thing necessarily?
I don't know whether I understood the question, but it could mean that I'm not sure if I understood the question entirely, but could it be saying that is there absolute beauty? So beauty that exists in every possible world? I would say there are instances of aesthetic properties that are that have to be grasped by anyone, and that are absolute. And there are some instances of absolute value. I think there are some instances whose value, some works whose value we cannot reject. We cannot reject. No human being would reject. Only a lobster would reject. But not all works are like that. So most of them are in the shades of value that is less worthy, more worthy, and so on. So there are shades of this. So I'm not sure if I understood entirely the question, but thank you for the question as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was a bit confused also. Pedro is with us, so if he wants to maybe clarify exactly what he meant in the chat, then we can get back to it. But Eric, our colleague in the program, also has a question.
Thank you.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much, Inês, for your talk. It's quite interesting, quite clear. I'd like to ask you a question about ugliness. There are poems and paintings and music about ugly things, nasty things, disgusting things. And these are objects. So the beauty in them, which is, say, is part of the object or part of the medium. When you use particular shades of color, a particular painting technique, does beauty lie there? or does it lie in the content? And we cannot see it as beautiful because it is ugly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. Well, you guessed correctly. Eric, that I do endorse an aesthetic theory of art. So I do want to claim that all art should have aesthetic value. So I have the problem of accounting for ugly paintings. Ugly paintings can still have value if they are valuable aesthetically. They should have some aesthetic value. So even if they depict an ugly topic, there should be some interest, in a sense, aesthetic interest in the painting or in the object that has some form and order. Within the ugliness, there should be some orderliness or order and some form that is in some way harmonious in a way. So it's a difficult thing to address. I understand that. It's just like the theist addressing the problem of evil. But it is something that can be accounted for by aesthetic realists and even those who defend an aesthetic theory of art. Ugly painting. So, for example, a not so elegant dress. This is an example by someone I don't recall now. It's an example of a character in a play that is dressed in a not very elegant manner, or rustic, or someone dressed in an elegant manner, but he's representing a rustic character. So this lack of harmony can be a defect in a work. So either the ugliness is a defect in a work, so either the ugliness is not intended, or if it's intended by the artist, and if it's part of the artistic creation, then it should have some meaning. It should have some meaning, and this meaning should be beautiful, I think. What do you think? What do you think? Do you agree? Are you thinking about Guernica, for example?
Yeah, by and large, if you take most of classical literature, you see poems about war, people getting killed in wars, and the poems are beautiful. But that is language. I wonder, I haven't got an answer for that. I wonder in cases like there is an ugly object. It is ugly, you find it ugly. But then when it's painted, it turns into a beautiful object. Because there was beauty hiding in it and the painting brought it out? Or is it because the painting made it beautiful? So what is beautiful is the painting, not the object. But I've got no answer to that. It's just think it's a big question.
Could be both. You have, for example, the painting of someone over 100 years who is very wrinkled, and that could be described as not following the patterns of beauty that we associate with beauty, at least physical beauty. But then there is another standard that can be brought in, and to understand those people and in very old age as beautiful, as in a different standard. So there are different standards. There is more than one standard, but the beauty is the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Inês. Actually, Pedro de Sá, he put a clarification on that question. Okay, so sorry if it wasn't clear. what I meant was, for aesthetics content to be real, does it need to be existent in the spatial temporal sense?
Thank you. That's a very difficult question. Very good. Yes. I think it's in reality. So it's in reality. Beauty is in reality. So I'm not a Platonist. Or at least beauty is in things. Of course, for example, in poetry, it's not physical. It's not physical, but it's in space and time. I'm not with those who think that works of music are eternal objects, or that aesthetic properties are floating somewhere in outer space. So I think it's something of here that we have here. It's it's very much here. And so real existence in spatial and temporal terms, I think. I hope I'm not contradicting myself. Thank you. So that is, and Pedro de Sá is also, do you want to read, Luisa? Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Complement. That is, does the aesthetic value of ugliness or garishness are something which exists in re, in the thing being judged as those things, ante re, outside or independent of them?
In re.
Yeah. Okay.
In re. So
Great.
I'm more of an Aristotelian there. Thankfully, nobody has asked whether they are tropes or universals yet, but aesthetic properties exist in things. They are very much in things. Yes.
Okay. We have other comments. Let's see. Leonardo Sotelo, could you go further on about why the case of the atheist discussing God is different than an anti-realist or a nihilist, perhaps, about beauty concerning aesthetic properties?
It's not that different. So, to be very honest, I'm suspicious of all anti-realisms, even though, well, I'm an anti-realist about unicorns in terms of it's just a fictional object. But it's a good question. I would have to think further about that. But the atheist discussing God is rejecting God, which is quite a big claim to make. So it's different in a sense. Both realists and anti-realists about beauty believe in beauty, whereas the atheist doesn't believe in God at all. So there's a difference there. It's just that the anti-realist about beauty says that it exists in the mind and in our minds that we project onto objects. Whereas I don't know any nihilist about beauty. Do you know any nihilist about beauty? Someone who says that nothing is beautiful? No. So I think there is a
Maybe our friend Rosie knows.
Maybe, I don't know if I answered well. Thank you for the question. It's very good. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky question.
We have lots of other questions.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the time.
Thank you.
But let's see. Okay, so Pedro Sá is kind of asking a follow-up to Leonardo's question. In discussing God as an atheist, one assumes God to be a meaningful expression, even though he believes it not to be real. Can one say the same about aesthetic non-realists?
Yes. They believe it to be meaningful, but not referring to something out there in reality. So it's the same thing. The anti-realist says that beauty is meaningful, so we understand what it is, but it's an imagination, it's a projection, but it's sad. It's very sad, I think. And it's a different way of being meaningful. One thing is to be meaningful in a sense that it's a consistent idea, something we can understand. Another thing is to be meaningful in a way that it relates to the world. So it's a fuller way of being meaningful. One thing is to be a unicorn, and one thing is to be a horse. A horse has more existence than a unicorn. So the God for the atheist is not the same God as the theist conceives. So they aren't talking about the same thing, in fact.
Yeah. Thank you.
But that's philosophy of religion. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Mateus Dabney. Are there epistemic evolutionary debunking arguments against aesthetic realism, aesthetic judgments, or mere products of evolution? If so, what are the ways to deal with them?
Aesthetic judgments are mere products of evolution. Fine. I don't have a difficulty with that. So it would bring in some form of relativism, I would say. So in different periods of time, we have different standards, and evolution will bring in different standards. That's not a problem. That's not a problem. All I say is that, so there is evolution, so that's related actually with what Louisa was saying. In different times, we see different things and we make discoveries, so there's no problem with that. That's perfectly compatible with aesthetic realism, so that's not a problem for aesthetic realism. I think, if I saw it right. Maybe I didn't.
No, yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
And I'm very anti-realist, but everything
You're very anti-realist.
Yeah, that's why Rosie asked me to be here. She was like, I'll put you in the fire, Lisa. You have to. Yeah. Let's see. Beatriz, our colleague in the program also, and she's helping organize the workshop, has a question. Okay. I read your book. Excellent, by the way. We all agree. And in it, you talk about how the notion of appreciation and love for a work of art can apparently lead us to anti-realism.
Yes, I say that it could. It could. Some people, anti-realists like Louisa, could say, because we bring in the notion of appreciation and love, then we fall into anti-realism. But what I say is that we are equipped with our capacities to grasp things. And sometimes we need some motivation to see things, even scientific things. So even if we need some admiration or love for something to look enough to see, that shouldn't force us to endorse anti-realism. So even if we need to have some interest to see things aesthetically, that doesn't mean that the things that we see aesthetically are not out there, that they are us. Just that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Beatriz. Louisa. Oh, Beatriz actually had a small follow-up here asking, yeah. Oh, sorry. How do you see this relation from a realistic perspective? So I guess that emotional relationship.
Mm-hmm. So emotions, and this is not me, for example, Peter Goldie, the late Peter Goldie, defends this in his book, The Emotions. Emotions are ways of, well, this is me trying to say this, so don't blame anyone else. Emotions relate us to the world as well. So emotions are ways of knowing as well the world. And so even if emotions are needed for us to grasp aesthetic properties, that doesn't make the properties belong to us and not to the objects that I say they belong to. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And Louisa Bell has a question. Who is the artist in the aesthetic realism? Is it the person who can perceive correctly the beauty in the world objects?
Who is the artist in the aesthetic realism? Is the person who can perceive correctly the beauty. Who is the artist? I don't think I understood the question, but is the
Louisa, we can ask her to try and clarify the question in the chat. But I kind of have a question that's, I guess, a bit similar. They have similar names and similar questions to Louisa. And my question is a bit about the purpose of the object. So I think the way you argue, we really do talk about beauty and art in that sense, in the realist sense. That's the vocabulary we use. So I guess you're right, like that's intuitive. But a lot of art nowadays, I guess maybe before, I'm not really versed enough to say, but a lot of the art nowadays is made to create a sentiment in whoever's observing it or consuming it or however it is. And in that poetry that you put before, like I guess what I mean is regarding the poem, a poem has things to say and you have things you bring into it. But I mean, how much does art that is specifically made to cause feelings in the viewer, how much does it actually say for itself? How much feeling is in it? I mean, if it's meant to cause feeling, if it's not actually, if it's meant to produce certain reactions in people, and I mean, it seems that a lot of art nowadays is like that. You're actually searching to input into the viewer a lot of the responsibility for the content, for the, I guess, and how much of that, how it empties, I guess, the work of art in a sense, or it doesn't. It doesn't empty the work of art. It continues being full of all those potential properties to be discovered.
Thank you very much for that question. It's excellent. So you pointed, it's spot on. So you spotted actually something very important in art nowadays, which is very much focused on response dependence and on what our reactions, our feelings, our projections, our dispositions, and ourselves, and not so much on the work. Some people say that the author is dead, or that the artist is not about the producer, it's about those consuming the art. And aesthetic realism is a bit conservative. Well, it's progressive, because sometimes for progress we need to make a step back sometimes. So it's conservative in the way that it wants to put beauty center stage again. So beauty is not at the center of art these days, and it's a shame. So aesthetic realists want to put beauty again in the center stage. And that's a conservative thing to do. So it's not very popular. It should be, because it's progressive, it's progress. It was a mistake. For example, Duchamp urinal, what's it called? Fountain, Duchamp fountain. I think that's not of much value. And what is worse is that many artists repeat that ad nauseam. And they just do things that aren't original anymore, and they aren't beautiful, and they are centered on reactions on shocking the audience and so on. And so there's a lot of that, and that's why philosophy has a duty to redirect things. So my aim, I use the word conservative, and maybe it was risky to use it because I'm progressive. I'm very progressive. But progress sometimes requires that we make a step back. Sometimes, if we are near the abyss, if we are near the precipice, I don't know if you can say that, the abyss, you cannot go forward. You have to go back. Otherwise, you fall. You fall into it. So I think in art there is a need these days for redirecting art. I think. It's my view. There is an essay by T.S. Eliot that I always recommend, which is Traditional and Individual Talent. It's an excellent essay. And it's exactly about that. We need tradition to understand individual talent. We cannot be madly reinventing the wheel in these days and producing alternative standards of beauty that aren't tried and tested. So I believe in sometimes being traditional. And I think traditional beauty, we have a lot to learn from traditional beauty, even very modern artists. I'm very modern. I see myself as very modern, but I think we should learn from tradition and build on what's good and add only what is an addition, a positive addition. So whatever is a positive addition, and we add. We shouldn't be creating new things just to be new or to be different, because in the end, they aren't that original and they aren't that good. That's my view. But maybe not everyone agrees with this. I know.
We had a question. Yeah, we had a follow-up from Leonardo Sotelo. Given that some people see better than others, see more, should we talk about levels of beauty? And we have a question related to that from Anna. We'll put it up next.
Mm-hmm. Very good. There are two things there. I agree that some people see better than others. Some people make more discriminations than others. Discriminations in terms of value neutral things, properties, and about value properties as well. And a separate thing from that is that there are levels of beauty. Indeed, some things are more beautiful than others, and some things are more obviously beautiful than other things. Some works of art are more obviously valuable than others. But these are two separate things, I think. So one thing is that some people see better than others. So some people will see beauty where others don't. But in fact, in reality, there is also the fact that some things are more obviously valuable than others. Others are more mixed. So thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you. Let's see if I can catch Anna's. Yeah. Oh. If beauty is an objective property, there needs to be an objective definition of beauty. In your opinion, what would that definition be? So I guess that's...
Okay. I don't think it follows that if beauty is an objective property, there needs to be an objective definition of beauty. Not everything that is objective needs a definition. Definition is on the level of conceptualization, on what we describe, on description of reality, and beauty or whatever we're describing is reality itself. So there does need to be a definition, an objective definition of beauty. Even though I could try to describe beauty in terms of form, orderliness, harmony, something of that nature. But it's just tentative. It's not easy to, and as Bishop Butler said, everything is what it is and not another thing. So beauty is beauty.
Yes, very nice.
Thank you very much for the question.
And here, so all the value of a work of art comes from its properties. moral intellectual properties or things like originality wouldn't contribute to the value of a work of art?
Excellent question. Excellent question. We are here. The question brings in two things, which is aesthetic value and artistic value. So aesthetic value is about the aesthetic properties, and these are restricted to what's aesthetic, even though it includes some moral and intellectual properties if we are generous enough to include them. And surely in artistic value, moral and intellectual properties would be in the artistic properties of a work. So the value of a work of art would be a mix of aesthetic properties, moral properties, intellectual properties, if you want to distinguish in that way. And it's true that defining aesthetic isn't too easy.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing out that.
Well, just a last comment. When you talked about being conservative and art kind of like going off the rails in the last century, I guess, with the fountain and everything that's been done and lots of things that are arguably art, maybe not. But it made me think of Rembrandt's The Slaughtered Ox. That's a really ugly thing to be. I guess it's a bit related to what Eric was talking, but it's such an ugly thing to see, a slaughtered ox, and but it's such a beautiful painting. It's gorgeous, really. And I wouldn't want to see that in nature. I wouldn't want to see that in the real world. So I guess it's just something. I guess. I mean, the painting is hundreds of years old, so it's not just that idea of ugliness. It's not something new. It's not just because people are trying to be innovative. I mean, people have been doing ugly things in art that somehow by their technique or other things, it just works. So I guess it's not so new. It's not so yeah.
Excellent question. And when I said that I am conservative about that, it's about that. So I'm very modern. It's just that we need to learn from tradition. We cannot just reject it. And I would see that if it's ugliness to make a moral point, for example, which is sometimes the case, sometimes ugliness, it's moral ugliness that is depicted. I'm not recalling Rembrandt's painting, to be honest, at the moment, but ugliness can be depicted to make a moral point, for example, and that has aesthetic value. That can have aesthetic value if it's a moral point. Morals can have aesthetic value. So
I put it on the screen.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. I don't remember it very well. If I saw it ever, if I had ever seen it.
It's in the Louvre.
Okay. Maybe I saw it. Okay. And but I understand it's a very good point. And it's like the problem of evil for theists. It's difficult. It's a vexata question. Yeah. It's a difficult question. So it depends. It's either to make a moral point, and I don't remember whether that's the point. Would you say that Rembrandt there is making a moral point with that painting?
I'm not sure. I think it's about. I think it's more about the day-to-day life of people, and he was into that posterior phase, and he was doing more natural scenes. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a bit about that. I'm not so sure. Maybe it's pushing the limits. Maybe it's something moral, mm-hmm. but I don't think vegetarianism was something very in hype.
Plain reality. Sometimes it's just plain reality.
Yeah, I guess it's the crudeness of reality being put into a painting in a very, I don't know, high manner. Maybe it's just like making diamonds from
Yes, but that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So there is beauty in that, in the action of depicting even something crude, as you said excellently. So even in the way of presenting ugliness, there can be value in making that. So I'm not against that. I'm just against art that is completely divorced from beauty. Just that.
Okay.
So I don't think Rembrandt was completely divorced from beauty. I don't think.
Yeah, me neither. I love that painting. I don't think that.
Yes, good.
But we've been here for over an hour, and I really want to thank you for accepting to participate and come here talk a bit about your book. We really appreciate it. It was
Thank
really wonderful. If I could, I would keep talking to you. I'm sure we could have hours-long conversations about NFTs. And all those ugly monkeys being sold is like, oh my God, that's not art at all. But I think we can stop here. Pedro Sá wants your email. Maybe he wants to ask some more questions, but really, thank you very much to everyone watching. There will be other days, Tuesday, Thursday at 7 o'clock Brazil. We'll have 7 p.m. We'll have another talk, and keep watch for the times, because not everyone is in the same time zone. And thank you very much for everyone watching, and thank you, Inês. It was wonderful. Really.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you. You were a wonderful audience as well. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, then that's it. Bye.
Thank you.
See you Thursday, everyone.
Bye-bye.